Picture a grand ballroom. The chandeliers are glowing, the champagne is flowing, and the room is packed with the most powerful people in the country. You have lawmakers, cabinet members, and even the president, all dressed in their absolute best. But right next to them, clinking glasses and sharing inside jokes, are the very journalists whose entire job description is to hold those politicians accountable. It is the White House Correspondents' Dinner. A night that is supposed to be a celebration of the First Amendment, but to anyone watching from the outside, it often looks like a private club where the watchdogs and the wolves are enjoying a steak dinner together. Why does this event exist in its current form? And more importantly, what does it cost us?
It is the ultimate paradox of American political theater. You have this incredibly glamorous night that is historically framed as a tribute to a free and independent press, but the optics of it are staggering. Imagine telling a citizen who is struggling to pay rent that the people making the laws and the people reporting on the laws are basically having a high school prom together, sponsored by massive corporate entities. It immediately creates a cognitive dissonance. The public relies on the press to be an adversarial force, a barrier against government overreach. Yet, for one night, that barrier completely evaporates into punchlines and photo ops.
Exactly. And I want to break down how this actually functions, because it feels like there is a massive disconnect between what this event claims to be and what it actually is. If we were to look at this through the lens of a strategic framework, say, breaking down its mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, the cracks start to show almost immediately.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. If you read the official literature, the core mission is noble: to honor the First Amendment and support journalism through scholarships. That is the stated North Star. The objective is to bring the press corps and the administration together to foster mutual respect. But when you look at the strategies and tactics, the plot completely loses the narrative. The strategy isn't about journalism. It is about spectacle. It is about generating viral moments. And the tactics? Booking A-list celebrities, hiring stand-up comedians to deliver roasts, and hosting exclusive invite-only after-parties funded by multinational corporations. The tactics completely undermine the mission because they transform a solemn democratic duty into a red carpet gala.
It is almost as if the tactical execution has entirely hijacked the original mission, which brings up a serious question of vulnerability. If we ran a diagnostic on this tradition, weighing its internal strengths and weaknesses against the external opportunities and threats, it feels like the risks are heavily outweighing the rewards right now.
Absolutely. The undeniable strength of the dinner is its visibility and its fundraising power. It raises real money for young journalists, and it commands the attention of the entire nation. It is a massive flex of institutional staying power. But the weaknesses are glaring. The primary weakness is the inherent hypocrisy on display. You cannot spend 364 days a year claiming you are holding truth to power, and then spend the 365th day taking selfies with that same power. It creates an echo chamber with a chandelier.
And the threats from the outside?
The biggest threat is the absolute erosion of public trust. We are living in an era where trust in the media is at historic lows. When the public sees this level of coziness, it validates every cynical suspicion they have that the system is rigged. The opportunity here, which is consistently missed, would be to radically strip the event down, to return it to a genuinely professional, perhaps even austere, gathering that actually focuses on press freedom without the Hollywood vanity. But the gravitational pull of the glamour is just too strong.
Let's zoom out even further. Because this dinner doesn't happen in a vacuum. There is a massive macro environment shaping every handshake and every joke in that room. The political, economic, and social currents right now are incredibly volatile. How do those external forces map onto what we see at the dinner?
It is a perfect microcosm of the broader landscape. Politically, the environment is hyperpolarized. So, when politicians attend, they aren't just relaxing, they are calculating. They are using the event to project a specific image, usually that they are good sports, that they can take a joke. It is political reputation laundering. Economically, you have to look at who is paying for the tables. It is not just news organizations. It is media conglomerates, tech giants, and massive corporate sponsors. The economics of the dinner reflect the corporatization of the news itself.
That is a fascinating point. The media isn't just the press anymore. It is a portfolio of corporate assets. And socially, The gap between the people in that room and the average citizen has never felt wider.
Precisely. Socially, there is a profound populist resentment brewing across the country. People are exhausted and struggling, and they turn on their televisions to see the elite class toasting each other. It is horrible social positioning. Technologically, the landscape has transformed the dinner into a minefield. 20 years ago, a bad joke or an awkward interaction stayed in the room. Today, every micro-expression is clipped, analyzed, and broadcast to millions on social media within seconds. The legal and environmental factors like the actual protections of the First Amendment and the physical bubble of Washington, D.C. just reinforce this idea that these people operate in a totally different reality than the rest of the country.
Which leads us to the most uncomfortable, but perhaps the most necessary question of this entire discussion. When you combine that economic backing, the political reputation laundering, and the social exclusivity, are we actually looking at a form of corruption? I don't mean bags of cash being handed over in a parking garage. I mean something more insidious. Did corruption in terms of the media, the government, and these non-governmental actors play a role in the events of that dinner?
If we define corruption as the compromise of core integrity for the sake of access and comfort, then yes, absolutely. It is a soft, institutional corruption. It is the corruption of purpose. When a news anchor is relying on a government official to leak them information, and that same official is sitting at their table drinking wine paid for by a defense contractor or a massive tech NGO, the lines of accountability are completely erased.
It is a conflict of interest that is hiding in plain sight. We are literally watching the watchdog being pet by the burglar.
That is the perfect metaphor. The media's power comes from its independence, but the dinner is built on the currency of access. Journalists want access to lawmakers to get the scoop. Lawmakers want access to journalists to shape the narrative. NGOs and corporate sponsors want access to both to ensure their interests are protected. It is a transactional triangle. Everyone in that room is trading something. And what gets traded away, subtly and quietly, is the adversarial friction that a healthy democracy actually requires. You cannot fiercely investigate someone you just did a tequila shot with at the Vanity Fair after-party. Human nature simply does not work that way.
So the corruption isn't necessarily illegal. It is cultural. It is the normalization of collusion under the guise of civility.
Exactly. It is capture. The regulatory capture of the press. The government doesn't need to censor the media if they can simply invite them to the party. When you make the press feel like they are part of the ruling class, they stop questioning the ruling class. They start protecting the institution because they are now members of it. That is the true danger of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It is a brilliant, glittering mechanism for neutralizing the press.
It really makes you wonder, what happens the morning after? When the tuxedos are returned and the hangovers fade, how does a journalist sit down at their desk and write a hard-hitting exposé on the person who just complimented their outfit 12 hours prior? It fundamentally alters the psychology of reporting.
It softens the edges of journalism. And in a time when the world is facing massive existential crises from economic instability to global conflicts, we do not need a press corps with softened edges. We need a press corps that is sharp, relentless, and entirely unbothered by whether or not they get invited to the coolest party in Washington.
It is a sobering thought. We started by looking at a glamorous party, but what we are really looking at is the fragile architecture of truth and accountability. If the people tasked with guarding the truth are too busy dancing with the people who obscure it, who is actually left to watch the door?
That is the question every citizen needs to be asking. Because the music in that ballroom will eventually stop, and the consequences of this cozy relationship will be paid by the people who were never invited to the dinner in the first place.
A powerful place to leave it. The spectacle may be dazzling, but the shadow it casts over our democratic institutions is long and deeply concerning. As the lines between celebrity, governance, and journalism continue to blur, we have to ask ourselves, are we being informed, or are we simply being entertained while the real decisions are made behind closed doors? Keep questioning the narrative.